What is going on, my lovely ladies and gentlemen of the world? Obviously, unless you have been living under a rock, you are aware that there was a Dragon Ball FighterZ beta over this weekend. Didn't go too hot for them, to be honest. There were issues with the matchmaking itself. People were spending there were thousands of people playing. Thousands. I didn't go through every single lobby individually to look at it all, but there were, basically the way it was set up was, it's like you have areas split into regions. So like you have the US West and the US East, which I think you should probably, the United States is a big goddamn place. You might want to split it up a bit further than that. Nonetheless, you have the US West and the US East, and then within those, and obviously there's also Canada, there's Mexico, Europe, it's all that stuff. There's all sorts of regions available. And within each of those, there's I can't remember how many, 15 to 20 maybe individual rooms that allow 64 people to be in them. And most of them were full. The majority of them were full that I saw. So, there were a lot of people, and yet, again, a lot of the people were spending minutes sitting there waiting for matches, and Namco Bandai came out, and they specifically said, we're aware there's an issue, it shouldn't be taking this long to find matches. We may extend the deadline of the beta in order to allow people more time to get proper matches. They wound up not doing that, and I don't blame them for it, right? Because the beta, it's not a demo, it's not meant to allow you to learn the game. Obviously, if it was meant to allow you to truly learn the game, they would have given us a training mode. If you are a fan, if you wanted to play Krillin, Goku, or Gohan, Kid Gohan, you did in fact get a training mode. More on that later. But everybody else was just, you got to play online matches and that was it. So it's obviously a network test, and if they can't find an easy fix, like a hot fix to it that they can easily implement and send it out while the beta is still going on, there's no point in them extending the deadline. They have 3 days of data to comb over, to look at, and to understand exactly what's happening. They don't need another 12 to 24 hours of their network messing up to look at to definitively be able to figure this out. So I certainly don't begrudge them. It would have, on one hand, it would have been kind of a nice, we know you screwed up, so let's give you a little bit of extra time with the game. On the other hand, they're giving you extra time with the game that's of bad quality because they're aware that there's issues. So it's kind of a positive and a negative there. So if anybody did get mad at that, which I hope they didn't, you shouldn't have. Nonetheless, let's discuss the game itself. Now, one of the things that I was somewhat tempted to discuss was the quality of the games themselves, the quality of the players. I am actually going to skip that. So if you're sitting here waiting for me to pop off on how scrubby everybody that I played against was, I'm just going to say it right here. They sucked. Nobody tried to make any adjustments. Every single match I played out the exact same way because everybody played the exact same way. And so instead of just knocking those players, because you had to expect this, right? You have people that believe that Dragon Ball Xenoverse is like a legitimately good fighting game with a lot of depth and some really good mechanics, and people just don't understand it. Anybody that has ever played a fighting game before knows that is not true. This isn't one of those cases where, you can look at Smash and just say, oh, it's just a party game meant for kids. It's not a real fighting game. It doesn't have any depth to it, and it's not supposed to, because it's supposed to cater to very specific people, and it does that very well. And so you're looking at these people who are just Dragon Ball fans, who have no interest whatsoever in fighting games as a whole, have never played a Street Fighter, never played King of Fighters, Mortal Kombat, none of it. They've never played anything but Dragon Ball games, and now they're getting into this game. And I feel like Arc System Works is legitimately hamstringing them from the get-go, in the sense that they have implemented a lot of things that cater to a very, very low level of play, but that also prevents you from learning anything useful. And so that's the biggest issue I have with this whole idea that fighting game developers have come up with, that you need to make these fighting games, quote-unquote, more accessible. Because the issue is that on a casual level, you somewhat succeed at that. Like, if people just want to sit down with friends and never put in any effort whatsoever and just screw around, get drunk, screw around with them a bit, get high, whatever, then it works out perfectly for that. But the moment they step online to try to derive some sort of enjoyment from playing over the network with other people, and they just get annihilated, they don't understand why. They're not given the mechanics to really derive an understanding of why it just occurred, because they don't get how this person is doing these things. Why are they able to make Dragon Rush look so much better? Why do their auto combos look so much better than mine? Right? It's because they're not using auto combos. It's because they're not abusing Dragon Rush. But oh my god, I'm still calling it Dragon Rush. It's not. Dragon Rush is the name for the throw, but somehow I got it in my mind that Dragon Rush is the super dash. And so I keep calling the dash Dragon Rush. So if I ever refer to Dragon Rush, I mean the dash, I don't mean the throw. But yeah, like, people were just leaning on that left and right. They weren't really trying to learn anything different. When they got punished, they didn't learn from that. They didn't adjust. They didn't stop doing it. They just kept doing it. And I feel like this idea that, again, you need to make fighting games more accessible just cripples people in the long run and winds up, you know, you're trying to cater to these people that regardless of how it plays out, they're going to play the game for 2 weeks and then never touch it again. Because they play the story mode, they've unlocked some things, they've tried out some characters, and they hop online, they lose 5 straight matches, they decide the game sucks, and they're never going to play it again. And then you have the people who are dedicated fighting game fans who are going to stick with your game for months and months, maybe even years, if you're lucky. They're going to pretend the mechanic doesn't even exist. And so, I hate how this is a continual development in fighting games where they keep trying to do this over and over and over. And I feel like it just cripples people in the long run because it gives them a shortcut to allowing them to, you know, like, mash things out and look like they're doing something without ever actually learning the game properly. And so you have a bunch of people, you're going to have 80% of these people that start out trying to use the super dash, trying to abuse it in neutral, not actually learning how to play neutral, just abuse this auto-tracking move that is safe on block for some reason. That can get you a full combo afterwards. Just abuse the hell out of it and don't stop until you run into somebody who knows how to punish it universally, who knows how to deal with it universally and will start blowing you up for it, and they don't understand why, and they just decide that, alright, you know, I've had my fun, but now I don't care anymore, I'm out. That's going to be 80% of the people who start out using auto combos, who use the easy neutral tools, who do all this stuff. No matter what you do, no matter how accessible it is, they are going to drop the game within the first 2 weeks. And then you have the chance, the opportunity for the other 20% of people to keep them sticking around, to really involve them in the learning process, and to understand that there is an underlying depth available here that they can really, if they spend time, they will dig it out, and they can, you know, see a lot of improvement and feel good about that, etc., etc. And you're crippling them by basically giving them an easy way out to avoid that depth. And so now that 20% of people that may have stuck around, they decide not to instead. Because they had their fun, they see the combos, this is all that this game has to offer. Look at all the people when you were looking at, you know, when they were going to events and showing off demos. This game lacks depth. You know, the combo options are very limited. You basically just get Magic Series stuff, or even, you know, the auto combos or the optimal combos, that's all you can do. And that's what people's opinion of it were. And they're completely wrong. There's no factual basis behind that. And yet I saw that over and over and over. And unfortunately, a large part of that is that there's some fairly influential fighting game figures who also said the same thing, who people don't understand suck at fighting games, and you shouldn't listen to them as an authority about fighting games, but they still said it, and then other people parroted it, and then it just kept spreading left and right, and those people need to be punched in the mouth so they can stop spewing stupid shit. Damn! Regardless, people got a Ghetto training mode if they were interested in Krillin, Goku, or Gohan, Kid Gohan. Because they had a practice mode available in the beta. And basically what this practice mode did was put you into a somewhat real match against very low level AI. And it was intended to allow you to try out different mechanics. So, you know, like, here's how to walk forward, here's how to dash forward, here's how to throw, here's how to, you know, call assist, do that. You know, just teach you the mechanics of the game. But it essentially served as a glorified training mode. For people that wanted to grind out stuff with those 3 characters. And the combos people were figuring out, the setups, etc., etc., were just getting more and more impressive as time went along. And that's going to be the case for every single character in the game. It's going to have a lot of depth to it. And people figured that out very quickly. But you need time to be able to figure these things out. And there were too many people who were not willing to give it that time. And that's just fighting games in a nutshell. So I wish developers would stop trying to cater to these huge swaths of people who are going to buy the game anyway, and no matter what mechanics are present in the game, they're going to drop it in 2 weeks. No matter what happens, they're going to drop it in 2 weeks. I don't know. But enough about that. I do wish that Dragon Rush, god damn it, the Super Dash was a bit more punishable than it actually was, just punishable at all. Because if they press a button afterwards, it's not positive on block. It is negative, unless you're in the burst mode, in which case it gets stupid, and I don't like it. But I do wish it was actually punishable, because you have this move that auto-tracks wherever you are on the screen, so you can't even avoid it and whiff punish it. You can avoid it somewhat, but every single time I did manage to do it, I basically did it accidentally. I never managed to. I tried many times to intentionally avoid it. It never worked. I also tried to 2H it on reaction, but the majority of the time it doesn't work. Unless they're about as far away from you on the screen as possible, 2H will not activate in time in order to blow that up. So really the only good way you have of dealing with it is 4S, which is the kind of reflect thing, which people believe starts up in 1 frame. So obviously if you have something that has some sort of invulnerability that starts up on frame 1, that's going to be your best method of dealing with reactable things. But the problem with that is it doesn't punish them. It just resets neutral. And that's actually kind of another thing. So a big component of this that I should say before I get any further into discussion is that given the type of game that this is, there are going to be parallels drawn between this game and the Marvel vs. Capcom series. They're inevitable. You cannot avoid them. They're not similar games. They really aren't. That being said, I feel like they should be more similar than they are. Like, for instance, one of the biggest mechanics in the Marvel vs. Capcom franchise is a flight mechanic. Many characters have the ability of flight that allows them to maneuver around the screen really quickly, really rapidly, really fluidly. The fact that this game doesn't have any flight mechanics, despite it being a Dragon Ball game, blows my mind. Aerial combat is such a huge feature in those games, like air-to-air combat, dancing back and forth, not just stuck on the ground the majority of the time. Obviously, there are many combos that you can do that begin in the ground and then wind up going into the air, and then you can, use the various tag features to keep them going in the air, but there's not much aerial neutral involved. At least not yet, not that I've seen, and I don't feel like there's much capacity for it within the game itself. And, that seems like, again, that just feels like a very weird omission to have in a game that is so heavily, where aerial combat is so heavily featured and important. Especially given, imagine, one of the most awesome things about this game is how cinematic it is. If you finish the match with certain things, you can blow up the stage and it winds up going from, this really nice backdrop into, this lava-filled wasteland with volcanoes erupting, and obviously, everything's gonna go down. The world's gonna blow up, etc., etc. Imagine if you could actually destroy the ground underneath you, and you had to involve yourself in aerial combat from that point. Maybe that's a bad idea. The more I think about it, it's probably a bad idea. But imagine if that was possible. But it's not, because there's no real aerial combat in the game. No real aerial neutralizer. Stop saying aerial combat, because there are many aerial combos available in the game. But in terms of neutral capacity, very little. And that's unfortunate. So, and that is the biggest thing for me, is that I was playing this game, and the entire time I was basically thinking, I actually think Marvel vs. Capcom is a better game. 3 and Ultimate. I should make sure I specify that. Especially Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. That's one of my all-time favorite fighting games. That's all I can say. It's probably the fighting game that I had the single most amount of fun with, that I got the most enjoyment from playing it. And so just because of that, of course I am going to have comparisons to it in my mind. And the entire time I was playing it, just from the very start when I was learning the mechanics and getting more understanding of them, I was thinking, man, I wish I was playing Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. And it feels terrible to think that, because, this is an anime fighting game now. It's anime fighting game's big chance to come into the limelight. I should be super hype about it. I should be celebrating its release, its birth. This should be a huge moment for me, and the entire time I'm just off in the background, sitting in the corners, being like, I don't even want to be here. I want to be in the party across the street that ended 3 years ago. And it sucks to be there, but that's where I am, man. And that being said, that could change. Like I said, once I get a real training mode and I can really, truly start to try and learn these characters and figure things out about them, that may change. But I feel like too much of the game is too safe in a way, and developed that way in order to cater to the Dragon Ball fans who do not understand fighting games, who do not understand the concepts of punishable and safe and all that stuff, and have no interest in learning it. And a lot of people draw parallels between those things and frame data, which obviously the frame data will tell you about these concepts, but it's not necessary. I never started getting into frame data until like Chrono Phantasma. And even then, I've never really learned the frame data. It's a completely unnecessary component to fighting games in general. Most of them. There are some of them, like for instance, that was the biggest reason why I stopped playing Tekken, is because I feel like you actually do need to know frame data if you want to succeed in this game at a high level. Like, you just need to have all of that shit compiled in a list in your head, and if you don't, you're never going to properly learn matchups. But I've never felt it's necessary in any of the other fighting games that I've played. But you do need to understand the concepts of punishable, safe, plus, what good pressure is, what frame traps are. You do need to understand that if you want to step your game up to the next level. And this game seems to kind of throw it all out the window. There's very, very little that's actively punishable. And even the stuff that is punishable tends to not be that bad. Like, for instance, one thing that really irked me was how little damage you do to assists. That's a huge component of Marvel vs. Capcom 3, or just Marvel vs. Capcom, and actually even a bigger component, Marvel vs. Capcom 2. It's far easier to destroy a poorly called assist in Marvel vs. Capcom 2 than it is in any other game like this. But again, like, assists take huge amounts of damage if you call them recklessly, if you call them in an unsafe spot, if you just, you're calling them on cooldown or whatever. It's a bad thing to do. You need to be careful with it. In this game, it doesn't care. Juggles don't really work on them. Even when you are hitting them, you do very, very minimal damage to them. It's just not punishing to poorly call in an assist and get it hit. I don't like that. It's not really punishable to just lean on the super dash, because it isn't punishable on block. There's not a whole lot you can do in order to straight up beat it. And so the best option is to use 4S, which just resets the neutral, and they're just going to do it again. Auto combos in general didn't feel all that punishable, that kind of stuff. Like, and that's perfectly fine, right? Because again, I'm drawing parallels between Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and this game. Very little is punishable in Marvel vs. Capcom 3. But you have a proper push block. The entire point of defense in Marvel vs. Capcom 3 is not to wait for your turn, is not to sit there and block properly, and once you've blocked properly enough, once you've done enough great blocking, you now have your turn, and you can either punish or pressure the opponent and run your own offense, and it just goes back and forth like that. That's not how the game works. That's not how the flow is. You just push block, and you reset neutral, and you try to win neutral. And that's initially what I thought the 4S would do, was that it was a push block, but it's not. You can only do it when you're outside of block stun. Apparently it is possible to use the reflect feature for projectiles. Some projectiles. You can activate it when you're in block stun from them. So I should preface it with that it is possible in that regard, but like if you're in the middle of a melee chain, you can't push block it at all. To, force a reset of neutral and allow you to go back to just fighting in neutral. And so that kind of irks me a little bit, because again, it's me drawing parallels between Marvel vs. Capcom and this game, and it's probably unfair for me to think that, but that's just where my head's at right now. And so I do feel like too much in this game is way safer than it has any right to be, especially when you're given a move that has no limit on its range, that auto-tracks your position on the screen, even if you move after it's been activated, that isn't easy to beat clean, and that lands you a pretty significant combo if it does hit. And it's not punishable. That's a whole lot of positives with no real negatives. And I feel like if you want to make a good, lasting fighting game, you can't really have mechanics like that exist in the game. So that was one thing that really irked me. Actually, honestly, that's probably the only thing that really irked me about the game itself. Other than, again, like the actual quality of play. that people, like nobody was really trying to learn the game itself. But that's not something that developers can control. It is somewhat if they didn't give people all these shortcuts to make it seem like they're actually capable of playing the game, when in reality they have no goddamn clue what they're doing. The amount of times, I was really confused for a while because I kept seeing people go through entire strings of moves while on the ground, it's not a combo, I'm not in block stun, but they're just going through this entire sequence of moves, and I was so confused the entire time. Like, why do they keep just doing like 4 straight moves, and then it stops, and they do 4 straight moves again, and then it stops, and it's the same moves over and over. And finally it occurred to me, like, oh, they're literally just mashing out the auto combo over and over and over, just on repeat, on cooldown. They're not trying to block anything, they're just mashing that out. That shouldn't happen. You should not be able to auto combo the goddamn air. That is stupid, and I hate it, and I wish that didn't exist. That being said, it's a really easy way to blow people up and learn the concept of whiff punishing. So I guess there is a teaching lesson in there in and of itself, but it's so dumb. It hurts me to see. Oh boy. But yeah, it's 10 days from release. I'm excited for it. I want to get my hands on the characters I actually care about. And again, actually have a training mode so we can really actually sit down and learn the game, which is my favorite part about these games in general, is the learning process. Especially learning new stuff, right? Like, eventually I'll look up resources for the characters that I want to play, because I'm good at learning like the most basic fundamental aspects of a character, at figuring out what makes them strong, what their weaknesses are. I'm great at learning that stuff. But in terms of like optimizing combos or finding out like not necessarily buggy stuff, but stuff that doesn't really seem like the character should have it, I'm terrible at finding that stuff. So like, I'll find some dirty mix-up with every character that I have. I'll find halfway decent combos that are serviceable for me, but I won't learn any optimal combos. I won't learn any like incredibly dirty 50-50 option select nonsense. I won't learn any of that. And so eventually I'll just, grab that from other people that spend far more time in training mode than I do. But I can't wait for it. But again, I cannot shake the lingering feeling of, I think that I'm not going to enjoy this game as much as I enjoyed Marvel vs. Capcom 3. And it's not going to be as iconic in my memory in the long run. Which, again, is an unfortunate reality to be in because of how important this game is, not only just for myself, but just for anime fighting games in general. And I think that we're going to find out in the long run if Team Red kind of tried a bit too hard to cater to the casual crowd, and if it kind of hamstrings them in the long run. I don't think it will. I think that there is plenty of depth available, but I do think they sacrificed some real potential that the game could have had otherwise if they didn't have that mentality going in. That they don't want to really cater too hard to the competitive crowd. And I feel like every time a game does this, it does wind up hurting them more than it helps them. I mean, we all see what happened to Street Fighter V. We all know what happened there. So, I don't know. We'll find out. I can't wait for it. Despite that, I am excited for it, and I want to play it for real. But I just cannot shake this lingering feeling that there's going to be something to it that's going to prevent it from having a significant amount of longevity that you should hope for. Like, how good I would feel if I was somebody that was behind Super Smash Bros. Melee, and I know that, like, however goddamn long it's been since that game came out, it's still one of the most popular competitive fighting games to this day. I would feel goddamn good about that. And that's the dream for me personally. Like, if I was going to look to make a game, having people playing it in some fashion, whether it's speedrunning, competitive, just it has long legs and it draws it. It's one of those games that no matter how long it's been since its release, people still want to play it. People, like people that maybe weren't old enough initially to be able to play it when it first came out, they hear about it because it's talked about, like, so there's so much universal praise behind it that they want to try it out, or just, whatever the case is, years down the line, people are still trying to learn and play your game. That is the goddamn dream. And time will tell if Dragon Ball FighterZ is capable of that. And I'm not saying one way or the other, like, I'm not thinking, oh yeah, no, this is impossible, it's not going to work out. it's not going to have long legs. I think it can, but I just haven't seen enough to definitively say one way or the other how that's going to turn out. So I certainly hope that it's going to be an amazing game, and then it's going to be, at EVO for the next 4 years until Dragon Ball Fighters, Dragon Ball Fighters Zoopers. Yeah. Go the Mortal Kombat route. Replace all your S's with Z's. There you go. Don't take advice from me. I'm going to end on that note. Bye.